It has been 6 months since my last robotic vacuum review, and it seems like these companies are releasing new models with flagship features every single month. So in this video, I've got 6 new top-of-the-line models from Roborock, Narwal, Dreame, Mova, Ecovacs, and 3i, and we're going to see if any of them are better than the overall winners from February, which were the Roborock Saros 10R and the Dreame X50 Ultra. And as always, there are no sponsored reviews on this channel. First, we'll test vacuuming performance on carpet and hard flooring. Then we'll see how well their mops work in different situations. After that, we'll see how well they deal with pet hair and long human hair. We'll test their object recognition and avoidance, mapping, and ability to clean in ways that previous generations of robotic vacuums couldn't. And last, we'll evaluate their specific apps, smart home integrations, and privacy features. To test their vacuuming performance, I prepared a mixture of 10 grams each of rice, flaxseed husks, salt, and flour to simulate different sized dirt and debris, and I ran each vacuum on their maximum suction power using a vacuum-only 2-pass cleaning. I weighed their dustbins before and after each cleaning, and then again after the auto-emptying process. And I thoroughly vacuumed with a corded upright in between tests. And we'll start out with the least expensive vacuum in this video, the $649 3i P10 Ultra. 3i released their super unique S10 flagship in 2024 that could pull water out of the air to refill its mopping tanks. But the P10 doesn't have any of that, and it's just a normal vacuum and mop with a pretty standard set of features. And in its 45-minute vacuuming run, the 3i P10 used 26% of its battery, and it collected 25.6 grams or 64% of the flour, salt, flax, and rice mixture. And after the auto-empty process, there was 1.1 grams left in the bin, but its small air filter was almost completely clean. After that is the $899 Dreame L40S Ultra, which is considerably less expensive than their flagship X50, and has almost all the same features except for the retractable LiDAR turret, and it only has 19,000 kilopascals of suction instead of 20,000. And in this test, the L40S Ultra cleaned for 30 minutes and used 23% of its battery to pick up 25.4 grams or 63.5% of the debris mixture, which is 0.5% less than the 3i, putting it in second place. And after the auto-empty process, the Dreame had 4.8 grams left in its dustbin, and that was mostly caked into the air filter. Next, for $12.99 is the Narwal Flow, which is their highest suction vacuum ever at 22,000 kilopascals, but in its 44-minute vacuuming run on my high-pile carpet, the Narwal was only able to pick up 16.2 grams or 40.5% of the flour, salt, flax, and rice, but it did only use 20% of its battery. And after the auto-empty process, the Narwal had 0.6 grams left in its bin, with a surprisingly clean air filter, indicating that its auto-empty system is very effective and this vacuum should be less likely to lose suction over time. After that, for $13.99 is the Mova V50 Ultra Complete, and Mova is another newer company that debuted at CES 2025, but it's definitely tied directly to Dreame, and you'll see that they use a lot of the same technology and have a lot of shared features. The V50 advertises a massive 24,000 kilopascals of suction, which helped it pick up 26.2 grams or 65.5% of the debris mixture in its 33-minute vacuuming run, putting it in first place. But all that suction took a lot of power, using 44% of its battery. And after the auto-empty process, the Mova still had a concerning 8.9 grams of debris left in its bin, which, similar to the Dreame, was heavily caked into the air filter. Next, for $14.99 is the brand new Ecovacs X11 Omni Cyclone. And I reviewed the Ecovacs X8 when it came out just 6 months ago, and since then they've released the X9, skipped over the X10, and now we're at the X11. And the X11 Omni Cyclone has 19,500 kilopascals of suction, which is 1,500 more than the X8, but the X11's carpet test was kind of a disaster. First getting stuck by wedging itself under my couch, then telling me that it completed its entire vacuuming task after only doing a perimeter clean, and then when I finally got it to do a full cleaning run, it got stuck under the couch 2 more times, and to top it off, in 36 minutes of cleaning, the X11 Omni Cyclone picked up just 20.5 grams or 51.25% of the debris mixture, putting it in second to last place in this group, which is especially surprising because the X8 had the second highest carpet score that I have ever recorded. However, the new bagless auto-empty system on the Omni Cyclone was very effective, and the bin and filter were relatively clean with only 1 gram of leftover flour dust. And last, last, for a staggering $2,599, we've got the most technologically advanced robot vacuum on the market that vacuums, mops, and picks up after you, the Roborock Saros Z70. The Z70's 22,000 kilopascals of suction matches the lower-priced Saros 10R, but the Z70 has a completely different brush roller system that uses recessed blades to avoid hair tangles instead of the popular and effective duo divide brush that we find on the Saros 10R. And in its 31-minute vacuuming run, the Z70 picked up 23.7 grams or 59.25% of the mixture, putting it in 4th place. And after the auto empty process, the Z70's small dustbins still had 2.7 grams of debris in it, which was almost all caked into the air filter. And that means that the Mova V50 Complete had the best score for this set of vacuums at 65.5%, and the 3i P10 Ultra was close behind that. But they were all significantly worse than the X8 Pro Omni, Saros 10R, and X50 Ultra from my February review. Next, repeating that same vacuuming test on my LVP hard flooring, again on maximum suction 2-pass vacuum only runs, all the vacuums performed significantly better, with the Roborock Saros Z70 recording a perfect 100% score. The Mova came in second at 98.5%, the Dreame had 97.5%, the 3i had 96%, and the Narwal and Ecovacs filled out the bottom 2 positions at 95.5% and 94.5% respectively. So that means for combined vacuuming performance, the overall top performer was the Mova V50 Ultra Complete with 65.6 grams picked up, and the Dreame was in second with 64.4. But as I said, those numbers still don't really come close to the Saros 10R, Dreame X50 Ultra, or Ecovacs X8 Pro Omni from earlier this year. In this video, I also measured their corner brush performance by putting a teaspoon of dried breadcrumbs in 4 separate locations in my kitchen and sending the robots out on a single pass vacuuming run. And to score them, I gave the vacuums 2 points for cleaning up a pile completely and 1 point for a partial clean. And these results were really strange because the top 2 scores were the Roborock and the 3i, scoring 7 points each, meaning they completely cleaned all the piles except for under the refrigerator. And the odd part about that is that the Dreame, Mova, and Roborock all have fancy articulating side brushes that are specifically for reaching into corners. And the Narwal has a new hinged side brush that extends when it's spun in reverse to be able to reach into corners. But the 3i just has a fairly traditional side brush design, and it somehow still ended up tied for first place. Similarly odd, Ecovacs has switched to a front-facing LiDAR system to avoid that top-mounted LiDAR bump, and as a result, it should be able to go under more furniture. But it decided for some reason that it couldn't fit under my stools, and it didn't even attempt to clean that pile, even though it would have had plenty of clearance. And last, for vacuuming, I measured the noise level at their highest suction power, and here they are from the quietest to the loudest. Moving on to mopping performance, I like to simulate a realistic test in my house, which is when wet mud gets tracked in on shoes and feet and then dries on the floor. So to do that, I spread 10 milliliters of Florida mud over a 2-foot by 2-foot square, and then I dried it with a hairdryer. Each vacuum then gets set to maximum water flow and 2 passes for a combined mopping and vacuuming run. And after each run, I spray the area with 2 sprays of water and wipe it clean with a paper towel, and then I set the paper towel aside to air dry. And in between each test, I mop the floor with a traditional wet mop, and I hand dry it with a towel. And this year I had a few anomalies in this test. First, the Mova V50 Ultra Complete is the first robot that I've ever seen to decide that the mud was too messy and chose to avoid a large portion of it on its first run. But it later decided that it was going to clean the stain, and it didn't do much better in its second attempt. And the Ecovacs also had some similarly strange behavior, cleaning erratically on its first pass, but then doing a completely normal second pass. And in this group of robots, there was really only one standout mopping performance, which was from the Narwal Flow, that not only has the new roller style mopping system with an onboard clean and dirty water tank, but it also has a double wide roller. And this is the first time that I've ever had a completely clean paper towel test, and I was so impressed with it that I reran the test a second time just to see if it could replicate those results, and they were both equally perfect. And maybe the most surprising part about that is that all the other vacuums have automatic detergent dispensers that are supposed to help with tough stains. But the Narwal requires you to add detergent directly to the clean water tank if you want to use it. And for these tests, I was just using plain water with the Narwal, while the rest of the mops were using their mopping solutions. A lot of these models also make vague statements about mopping mopping with warm or hot water, so I recorded each mopping session with a thermal camera. And while some of the robots themselves were clearly warmer than others, there wasn't any evidence that I could see that the floors were being mopped with significantly warmer water than room temperature. However, the vacuums do use heated water to clean their mopping pads at the base, and they dry their mops with hot air. And all of that uses power, so I measured the energy required for each robot to mop a 100 square foot space, wash and completely dry their mop, and the Narwal used the most energy at 0.412 kilowatt hours. The Ecovacs and Roborock were around 0.3 kilowatt hours, and the rest of the robots were under 0.2 kilowatt hours per mopping run. All these robots also have the ability to extend their mops to clean under cabinets and close to the wall, so I tested those abilities by putting a smear of hot sauce in 5 separate locations in my kitchen and scoring each robot's mopping performance by awarding 1 point for a partially clean spot and 2 points for a completely clean one. And coming out on top again, the Narwal Flow used its extra wide extending roller brush to carefully hug the corners and reach under the stool, completely cleaning 3 of the spots and mostly cleaning the other 2. The Dreame also did very well, and it had a new corner cleaning algorithm that stops, rotates, and extends the mop for maximum coverage. The Roborock had decent coverage, but struggled to absorb the hot sauce on its mopping pads, and it left a lot of streaks and smears. The 3i started out pretty well, and then it failed to clean under the quarter cabinet, and it also missed the outside corner by the stove. The Ecovacs kind of just looked like it was cleaning randomly, and it didn't really make any effort to hug the walls or corners. And the Mova had the worst corner mopping score, with a combination of poor edge detection like the 3i and poor mop pad absorption like the Roborock. And for the last mopping test, I looked at whether the vacuums could mop and vacuum a room with both carpet and hard floors without getting the carpet wet. And I found that despite them being able to lift their mopping pads, the Mova, Narwal, and 3i all got my high power carpet wet when doing a combined vacuum and mopping run. The Dreame and Roborock were able to keep the carpet completely dry by recognizing that the room had both carpet and hard flooring, and then detaching their mopping pads at the station to vacuum the carpet first, and after that was done, they returned to their base to grab their mopping pads before cleaning the hard floors. And oddly, the Mova also has the ability to leave its mopping pads at the station, but it isn't programmed the same way that the Dreame and Roborock are, and it only detaches its mopping pads when it's doing a vacuum-only run. And the biggest surprise during this test was the Ecovacs, which doesn't have detachable mopping pads, but it somehow managed to mop the floor and then travel directly onto the carpet without getting the carpet wet. So I'm not sure if it can just lift its mopping pad that high, or if it's just scraping all the moisture out of the mop before vacuuming the carpet. But either way, it was pretty cool to see. And that means that overall for mopping, the Narwal was in a league of its own, with by far the best hard floor mopping performance and the best corner mopping, with its main weakness being the inability to cross high pile carpet without getting it wet. However, while roller style mops like the Narwal Flow and the Ecovacs X11 are significantly better at cleaning up big messes, they also require a bit more maintenance. Specifically, you'll need to clean the onboard reservoir, where it constantly scrapes dirty water off the mopping roller with every revolution. And while you can get away with just throwing spinning mopping pads in the washing machine, you will need to actually get in and brush out the reservoir on the roller mops about once a month to keep them draining well. Another big problem that these vacuuming brands have been trying to solve is hair pickup and tangle avoidance. And in this group, there are 4 different potential solutions. First, the Dreame, Mova, and Narwal are all using tapered brush rollers that are only connected to the vacuum on one side, so any hair that wraps around the roller will eventually travel down the brush and into the suction port. The Roborock Saros C70 is using recessed blades on 2 sides of the rollers that have the function of pulling in any tangled hair and cutting it in half so that it can be more easily collected in the bin. The Ecovacs uses a detangling comb combined with their anti-tangle brush roller, and the 3i P10 Ultra actually has a blade on its base that runs across the brush roller before the auto empty process to hopefully cut any tangled hair free. But the question is, which of these solutions actually works? And for the first test, I started with a very realistic task of cleaning up 30 individual strands of real 12-inch human hair from my bathroom floor. And then after the auto empty process, I carefully inspected each robot for any hair tangles. And in this test, most of the vacuums performed very well, with the Narwal coming in first, with not a single piece of hair tangled anywhere on the robot. The Dreame and Roborock each had 1 stray piece of hair tangled up in their wheel axle. The Ecovacs had 2 strands caught up in its wheels. The 3i had a bit more than that, all tangled up in the brush roller itself, and the Mova was mostly tangle-free, but it had an issue with its auto-empty system where clumps of hair would get caught in the back flap and then dragged around until they fell off at random places in my house. I also ran a second, less reasonable test, and I spread out 1 gram of synthetic 16-inch blue hair and 2 cotton balls separated into tufts to simulate pet fluff on my high-power carpet. And then I ran each robot on a 1-pass vacuum-only run. Afterwards, I collected any unclean pet hair tufts and any leftover synthetic hairs on the carpet, and I inspected each robot for tangles and clogs, and as expected, this test was much more extreme, and starting with leftover hair and fluff on the carpet, the Roborock basically didn't clean any of the pet fluff, and it just matted it into the carpet. And there was also a significant amount of synthetic hair left over. The Dreame also struggled to pick up the fluff on the carpet, but I think that it was mostly because it saw them as obstacles that it needed to avoid, and the 3i also had some erratic behavior around those fluff balls. The Ecovacs cleaned in a normal pattern, but it still left quite a bit of pet fluff and even more synthetic hair. The Mova did a very respectable job with just a couple leftover pieces, but the Narwal did a truly awesome job, and it cleaned up 100% of the hair and fluff on the carpet. And even more incredibly, the Narwal also managed to almost completely avoid any tangles, with just a single strand of blue synthetic hair stuck in between the rubber and the plastic of the wheel, which, as I said, is a ridiculously amazing performance on its own, and the best that any robot has ever performed in this test, but it's even more amazing considering how much hair and fluff was on the other vacuums. And overall, the tapered brushes seem to perform significantly better than any of the other methods of preventing hair tangles, and the Roborock's cutting brush was completely matted. The Ecovacs brush had a large tangle in the center of the roller, and the 3i's hair cutting system wasn't effective in this test, and the brush roller was still completely tangled. And here's an overview of the amount of hair and fluff each robot left on the ground, and these piles represent what was tangled on the robot itself. And that means that twice now in this video, Object Avoidance has stopped these robots from cleaning my testing area completely. But now it's time to see how well it works when it's supposed to. So I set up my living room with a pair of untied shoes, some rubber dog poop, and a loose extension cord, and I sent each vacuum on a one-pass vacuum-only run, and to score their object avoidance, I gave them 2 points for avoiding an object and 1 point for moving it with no catastrophic outcomes, like getting stuck or running over dog poop. And the only perfect score of 6 came from the Mova V50, which kept appropriate distances from each object, meaning cleaning right up against the extension cord and shoes, but keeping a safe distance from the dog poop. The 3i P10 Ultra earned 5 points, avoiding the dog poop and shoes, but tangling itself up on the cord, pulling it several feet away before breaking itself free. The Roborock Saros Z70 also scored 5 points, again avoiding the dog poop and shoes, but moving the extension cord several times. The Ecovacs scored 4 points, successfully avoiding everything on the first part of its cleaning task and then running directly over the dog poop. And the Dreame knew that it shouldn't run over the dog poop, but it got a little too close with its side brush, ultimately still scoring 4 points, but it would have been a total disaster. And coming in last with just 3 points total, the Narwal first got itself snagged on the cord, and then it completely disregarded the dog poop, running it over multiple times, and it really made no effort to avoid it. Also in this test, we can talk about the main selling point of the Roborock Z70, which is the fact that it is the first robotic vacuum to also have a 5-axis mechanical arm that can recognize and move objects out of the way to clean under them, and it can even identify and sort objects into different locations. And my impressions of the Z70's arm are mixed. On the one hand, I love to see new innovation, enabling these vacuums to become even more useful than they already are, but on the other hand, the advertised use cases like picking up used tissues from the floor and throwing them away, and finding socks on the ground and sorting them into a separate bin, really seem like personal hygiene problems that shouldn't need a state-of-the-art robotic vacuum to solve. And the Saros Z70 seems like a huge amount of technology to counteract what could be a pretty simple lifestyle change. And about the only real application that I can think of is if you had a dog that leaves stuffed animals around, the Saros Z70 could put them all away in some central location before cleaning. But if it's your kids leaving their toys around, the Saros Z70 is less likely to be able to pick up non-stuffed animal toys. And as a father myself, my personal opinion is that teaching your kids to put away their own toys is probably better than relying on your vacuum to do it. That said, these vacuums do have a couple flagship features that I do find very useful, and the first is being able to climb higher than normal thresholds between rooms. And to test this, I built 3 different size thresholds at 13 millimeters, 30 millimeters, and 50 millimeters. And each of the thresholds has both a ramped side and a flat side. And in this test, all the vacuums were ultimately able to cross the 13 millimeter threshold, but the Narwal and especially the Dreame struggled quite a bit more than I was expecting on the flat side. At 30 millimeters, the Narwal Flow and Mova V50 crossed both the ramp side and the flat side with no issue, and the Roborock Saros Z70 eventually crossed the flat side after a little bit of struggle, but the 3i, Dreame, and Ecovacs all failed to pass back over the 30 millimeter flat threshold. At 50mm, the Narwal, Dreame, and Ecovacs were able to cross the ramp side, but not the flat side. The Roborock and 3i weren't able to cross in either direction, and the Mova V50 was the only robot that was able to cross in both directions using the same technique and hardware as the Dreame X50 Ultra from my last video. So if you have an abnormally large threshold in your house, the Mova V50 or Dreame X50 Ultra are the most likely to be able to handle it. The way that the robots handle mapping and navigation is also evolving quite a bit, and the Dreame and 3i are the only ones that still have a traditional top-mounted LiDAR unit, which in theory should give the other robots a clearance advantage. But in reality, the Dreame L40S Ultra has a total height of 95mm, including its LiDAR bump, while the Narwal Flow is 95mm without a LiDAR bump. And the Ecovacs X11 is 3mm taller than that at 98mm. And unfortunately, in my testing, switching from 360-degree LiDAR to front or rear only ultimately decreases mapping and navigation efficiency, and it also seems to affect the robot's ability to tell which furniture items it can and cannot fit under. And neither the Mova nor the Ecovacs decided they would be able to fit under my kitchen stools that have plenty of clearance, but at the same time the Ecovacs continually wedged itself under my couch until I set up a no-go zone. And when it comes to navigation, clearance, and correctly determining furniture height, Roborock's StarSight navigation is in a league of its own, and it seems to know exactly where it can and can't clean, and the fact that it's only 79mm tall means that it has an additional 16mm of clearance over the Dreame and Narwal, making it by far the best option for cleaning under furniture. And the last things we need to cover in this video are their apps, smart home integrations, privacy, and local control. And while the apps from 3i and Narwal are definitely usable, Mova, Dreame, and Roborock have nearly perfected their apps with a delicate balance of ease of use and customizable features. And for me, the Ecovacs app falls somewhere in the middle of that, with basically all the same features as Dreame, Mova, and Roborock, but it's just not quite as easy or intuitive to use. I also really like to be able to control my robotic vacuum with voice assistants to tell it to clean up a specific room without getting out my phone. And while all the vacuums support Amazon Echo integrations, the 3i doesn't support room-specific cleaning, and for the rest, you just have to know the right thing to say. I also tested Google Home integrations, and the only one that I wasn't able to get working at all was the Narwal. And the Roborock, Dreame, Mova, and Ecovacs all support room-specific cleaning commands, while the 3i only supports on and off commands. If you are a Home Assistant user, the Roborock Saros Z70 is the only one that gives what I would call a full-featured integration, and the built-in Ecovacs integration doesn't support the X11, Dreame's custom integration doesn't support the L40S Ultra, and the 3i and Narwal don't have integrations at all. But for the first time in a very long time, I'm happy to report that we do have some form of local control by way of a Matter integration for both Ecovacs and Roborock. And I did check, and this is a completely local connection that allows for some minimal amount of customization and cleaning, even when the vacuum is completely blocked from the internet. And impressively, the Roborock even maintained all of its robotic arm functionality without an active internet connection, which means that all the image processing and recognition is being handled on the robot itself. But for both the Ecovacs and Roborock, you will need to connect at least once through the app to set up your map and your preferences. So looking at the total scores for each vacuum, none of them stand out as clear winners like in my previous video, with 4 vacuums coming in with an average score around 3. The Mova V50 Ultra Complete finished in first with an average of 2.9 thanks to its object avoidance and threshold crossing abilities, but at $13.99, that's $200 more than the Dreame X50 Ultra, which has the same threshold crossing, the same object avoidance, and the same mopping, but better overall vacuuming scores. And the same is true for the Roborock Saros C70, which had an average score of 3.2, but if you don't need the robotic arm, which is a cool concept but ultimately not ready for prime time, then the Roborock Saros 10R has all the great parts of the Saros Z70, like low furniture clearance, best-in-class navigation, and excellent smart home integrations, including Matter support, for less money. And as a bonus, it also had better vacuuming scores and much better hair tangle avoidance thanks to Roborock's Duo Divide brush system. And 6 months later, I still think that the Roborock Saros 10R is the best all-around vacuum and mop on the market right now. However, as I mentioned earlier, the Narwal Flow is the best mopping robot that I have ever tested by a fairly significant margin. And even though its overall score was just average at 3.0, if your main goal is mopping and you don't have high pile carpet that needs to be vacuumed, then the Narwal Flow is an easy choice. And the fact that it has great hair pickup and tangle avoidance is just an added bonus. I also think that the Dreame L40S Ultra is worth considering since it's basically just a slightly more budget-friendly version of the X50 Ultra, so if you don't need things like the ultra-high threshold crossing ability or the first-person remote control, the L40S Ultra gets you a very similar performance to the X50 for quite a bit less money. As always, there are no sponsored reviews on this channel, but I do have links to all the vacuums down in the description, and as always, I appreciate when you use those links since as an Amazon affiliate, I do earn a small commission on the sale at no cost to you. I also want to thank all of my awesome patrons over at Patreon for their continued support of my channel, and if you're interested in supporting the channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.